The media fixates on kinetic escalation. They report on Iranian rhetoric of incitement and destruction, I-24 News. They showcase Israel's production line of surprises for the next war, Net News. This is a calculated distraction. The launch on warning posture is obsolete because the primary vector of attack is no longer a missile. It is silence. The global financial and military system runs on a network of undersea fiber optic cables. Trillions of dollars in transactions, C3I military commands, and logistical data travel through these vulnerable conduits. This is the true circulatory system of Western power, and according to RUSI threat assessments, it is almost completely undefended. The blueprint is proven. First, engineer a solvency crisis. Observe the U.S. intervention in Venezuela, which severed Cuba's vital supply chain for fuel. Source number 3. This is not foreign policy. It is economic strangulation designed to create a mathematical certainty of desperation. An energy crisis becomes a national security crisis, forcing the target's hand. When a nation's conventional options are exhausted, its economic liability becomes a weapon. It is compelled to deploy its final leverage, a low-cost, high-impact asymmetric attack, not against a carrier group, but against the data flow. According to CSIS analysis, the kinetic cost to sever a critical deep-sea cable is negligible compared to the systemic financial damage it inflicts. The result is the blind Leviathan, a superpower stripped of its senses. Imagine every screen on the New York Stock Exchange frozen, every ATM offline, every GPS-guided asset directionless. The Bank Policy Institute's own projections for January 2026 acknowledge the systemic fragility of a liquidity freeze triggered by data interruption, BPI cites. The dominant power is rendered impotent, not by an explosion, but by a dial tone. Forget satellite images of missile silos. The key indicators are now found in reports on national debt, energy dependency, and supply chain fragility. The next war will not be announced by sirens, but by the sudden, deafening silence of a world unplugged. Economic weakness is now the designated trigger for systemic collapse. The motive is not conquest, it is solvency. According to CSIS analysis, a protracted conventional war is the fastest vector to domestic collapse. It becomes a terminal liability on the national balance sheet, an unpopular drain on a fragile economy. When the cost of kinetic engagement exceeds a state's financial viability, the war itself is reclassified as a solvency crisis. This is not a theoretical model. The blueprint is operational. Consider Cuba. Its systemic reliance on Venezuelan oil was a known vulnerability. The United States intervention in Venezuela severed that critical energy supply chain. This action was not random. It was a targeted strangulation designed to induce a national crisis, placing maximum pressure on the Cuban government. This engineered weakness forces a pivot. A state facing a solvency crisis cannot afford a symmetrical response. The mathematical calculus shifts. The only remaining leverage is an asymmetric attack, a low-cost action with a disproportionately high impact against the adversary's core infrastructure. Economic weakness is weaponized into the launch trigger. Adversaries recognize this protocol. Rhetoric from state actors like Iran's Khamenei, accusing the U.S. of incitement and destruction, is a direct acknowledgement of this economic pressure. More critically, they are preparing a response. The founder of the Iron Dome system confirms that adversaries now maintain a production line of surprises. This isn't a defensive posture. It is the pre-positioning of asymmetric assets for a launch-on-warning scenario, triggered not by missiles, but by a liquidity crisis. The kinetic cost curve has inverted. According to the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, The cost to neutralize a $5 million main battle tank is now approximately $500, the price of a commercially available FPV drone. This is not a tactical anomaly. It is the mathematical engine of the new conflict doctrine. We call this the democratization of violence, the collapse of the barrier to entry for projecting system-critical lethal force. When a state actor, such as Cuba, is engineered into a solvency crisis through the severance of a critical energy supply chain, its conventional military becomes a fiscal liability. The only remaining leverage is asymmetric. The protocol forces their hand not toward a conventional response they cannot afford, but toward a low-cost, high-impact strike against the core financial or infrastructure systems of the aggressor. The math is irrefutable. Economic strangulation does not de-escalate. It triggers a launch-on-warning posture for asymmetric retaliation. The theater of operations is not a single battlefield. It is a distributed network of engineered pressure points. These gray zones are not hotspots of organic chaos. They are designated laboratories for a specific protocol. Regional instability, from warnings in developed nations to supply chain failures in the global south, are not the cause of the coming crisis. They are the symptoms of its staging. The blueprint is observable in real time. Reference Cuba. A U.S. intervention in Venezuela severs a vital fuel supply chain, triggering a premeditated energy crisis. This is not collateral damage. According to CSIS analysis, this is the deliberate application of economic strangulation to push a state toward a solvency crisis. This manufactured desperation is the designated trigger for the next phase. As the U.S. warns Tehran against escalation, it confirms the model. The protocol is designed to force the weaker actor's hand, compelling them to deploy their only remaining leverage. The response is mathematical. Net News reports that targeted states are now building a production line of surprises. This is the asset conversion. Economic liability is transformed into a low, kinetic cost, high-impact asymmetric attack vector. Their weakness is not a bug. It is the feature that initiates the launch sequence. Therefore, these gray zones, these proxy laboratories, are merely testbeds. They are used to calibrate the exact pressure required to force a launch-on-warning response. The instability is the controlled detonation used to study the accelerant, perfecting the protocol before it is aimed at the core financial and infrastructure systems of the dominant power. The lab is on fire by design. The launch-on-warning doctrine is not a strategy. It is a systemic protocol from a bygone era. The logic is brutal and absolute. If national sensors detect an incoming existential attack, you launch a full retaliatory strike before the enemy's assets impact. You do not wait for confirmation. Waiting for a ground-level detonation means you have already lost. The system is designed to remove human hesitation from the equation when seconds are the only currency. Now, introduce the modern vector, the cyber attack. This is the fog of digital war. According to analysts at RUSI, a hostile actor no longer needs a multi-trillion-dollar arsenal. They only need to blind your command and control systems. A targeted cyber attack can create false positives on early warning radar, or, more critically, sever the data link entirely. The screen goes black. The commander is now operating in a data vacuum. Is the signal loss a benign system failure, or is it the prelude to impact? The doctrine provides only one answer. The fear of inaction, of being annihilated while waiting for data that will never arrive, forces the commander's hand. This is the endpoint of asymmetric escalation. An economically cornered state facing a solvency crisis uses a low-cost digital key to turn the dominant power's own military doctrine into the trigger for mutual destruction. The liability has become the leverage.